It is obvious that what I teach has to do with what we call the psychoanalytic experience. So to transport all that into, I don't know, something that doesn't put it into any position to know what they call by a nice name that sounds like a sneeze, a Ml'tchell. Far be it for me to be so pretentious. That's what I hate most. I'll never indulge in that, thank God. No Ml'tchell. And all the rest of those Ml'tchell, I loathe them. What I teach has to do with something very different, with technical procedures and formal details concerning an experience that is either very serious or an incredibly errancy, something mad, demented. And that is what it looks like from the outside. The basic thing about analysis is that people finally realize that they've been talking nonsense at full volume for years. For my part, I try to show by starting out from what clarifies its reason d'etre, why it lasts, why it goes on, why it ends up as something that is very often not at all what they think they have to announce to the outside world. What they claim to owe to the way it operates, it's obvious that this is a discursive operation, a discourse operation. You'll say to me that some people go through their whole analysis without saying anything. If that's the case, it's an elegant silence. We do not have to wait for analysis to take an interest in discourse. Indeed, discourse is a starting point for anything scientific. It's not enough to imagine philosophy in the register I was talking to you about, namely how beautiful thoughts were passed on down the ages. That is not what this is about. The purpose of philosophy is to specify the extent we can extract things that are certain enough to be described as a science from a discourse operation. It's taken time for a science to emerge, or a science which has certainly proved its worth, though what it proves remains to be seen, though it has been proved effective. It's all about perfecting the correct use of discourse and nothing more. What about experience, you say? The whole point is that experience is constituted as such only if we start out by asking the right question. We call that a hypothesis. Why a hypothesis? A hypothesis is simply a question that has been asked in the right way. Something, in other words, begins to take a de facto form. And in fact, always made up of fiat de discourse. No one has ever received fact. That is not a fact. It's a lump, something you bump into. All the things that can be said about something that is not already discursive articulated. Psychoanalysis, which is an absolutely new example of discourse, is to take a little look at how we pose the problem of, for example, roots. It encourages us, for example, to investigate the phenomenon constituted by the appearance of a logic, its adventures, and the strange things it ends up showing us. There was a certain Aristotle and his position hyphen, what you believe after this declaration is of little importance hyphen, was not dissimilar to mine. We don't really have much idea of whom he had to deal with. They were called in a vague, confused way sophists. We naturally have to be suspicious of these terms, and we have to be very careful. There is in fact a blackout on what people got from sophist oracle, probably something effective, because we know that they paid them very well in the same way they pay psychoanalysis. Aristotle certainly got something out of it, but it had absolutely no effect on the people he was talking to. That's how it was for him, and how it was for me. It's the same. And what I say makes no difference to psychoanalysts who are already very settled in their ways, but we can continue and help. All of the wonderful things we find in prior analytics, the posterior analytics, in the categories of what we call logic. It's been devoured now because we are the ones who do real serious logic, though we've not been doing it for long, since the mid-19th century, about 150 years. Correct, strict, true logic is the logic that began with a certain rule. Gives us the opportunity to revise a few ideas. We always believed that when we had established a few good principles from the outset, everything we could derive from them would run smoothly, and that we would always fall on our feet. The important thing was that a system should not be contradictory. That was all that there was to logic. And then we noticed that it is not like that at all. We discovered lots of things that escape us. If by some chance a people here and there have heard of a certain Gödel, they may know that even arithmetic turns out to be a basket. I'm not saying it's a double bottom, but there are lots and lots of holes in the bottom. Everything disappears through the hole in the bottom. That is interesting, and it is impossible from taking an interest in it might not be without a formative value for someone like psychoanalysis. But for the moment, it gets us nowhere, because we have here a very particular problem that I call the age question. If you want to do logic or anything else to do with modern science, you have to start before you have been completely cretinized by culture, of course. Obviously, we are always a little cretinized because there is no escape to secondary school. Of course, secondary school may have its value too because those who survive and still have the real scientific capacity are cases apart, as anyone will tell you. My good friend, the Prince of Ringwood, who was cretinized at the same time as me at school, escaped immediately, brilliantly and in lively fashion. It took psychoanalysis to get me out. It has to be said that not many people have taken advantage of it the way I have. Logic is a fairly precise thing and requires some mental resilience that has not been completely worn down by all the stupid things they force down your throat. So I must have had it at a very early age. The only problem is that being very young is not the best condition to make a good psychoanalysis either. And when someone with some experience does happen to enter the psychoanalysis profession, it's too late to teach him the key things that would train him for its particular practice. I mentioned logic to give you a target. There's more to that, but logic is exemplary if we take it at Stokel's level, because he obviously did try to inaugurate something. Of course, those people, the sophists, were already using logic in quite astonishing, very brilliant, very effective ways that went with rationality. That they themselves did not give it a name obviously does not mean that isn't what it is, that's for certain. They would not have been so good at enticing citizens and non-citizens and at giving them tips on how to win debates or on how to debate the eternal questions of being and non-being. If it didn't have a formative effect, Aristotle tried to perfect a technique, what they call the organon. He gave birth to a line of philosophers, and now you can see where that got him. His line has died out a little bit now that philosophy has come down to meaning the history of thought, which means we're still having a bloody hard time with it. Fortunately, there are still a few counterfeiters around to try to put you back on top of things. They're called phenomenologists. Psychoanalysis gives us a chance to start again.